Imagine a movie so physically punishing that its stars emerged bruised, soaked, and oil-smeared. Yet incredibly, nobody was seriously injured. The Poseidon Adventure wasn't just a groundbreaking disaster film. It was a behind-the-scenes adventure filled with gambling scandals, on-set feuds, accidental improvisations, and one actor's death-defying stunt that launched an entire career. From Gene Hackman's infamous toupee struggles to Shelley Winters' dramatic weight gain and underwater prowess, this 1972 classic hides secrets as dramatic as its upside-down spectacle. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about the Poseidon Adventure. Fact 1. Shelley Winters gained 35 pounds and never lost it. Method acting can demand incredible sacrifices from performers, but few Hollywood stars have paid quite the long-term price that Shelley Winters did for the Poseidon Adventure. The acclaimed actress, who had already won 2 Academy Awards by the time she joined the production in 1972, made a deliberate decision to gain 35 pounds, specifically for her role as Belle Rosen, the former swimming champion turned grandmother trying to survive the capsized luxury liner. Winters believed that adding significant weight to her frame would make her character more believable and relatable as an older woman undertaking a physically demanding journey through the upside-down ship, and she committed to the transformation with the same intensity she brought to all her performances. What started as a calculated professional choice, however, became a source of frustration that followed Winters for the rest of her life and career. Despite her attempts to shed the weight after filming Wrapped, she found herself unable to return to her previous size, and she spoke openly in interviews throughout the following decades about how those 35 pounds simply refused to come off. The actress would repeatedly mention in conversations with journalists and fellow actors that gaining weight for Belle Rosen had been one of her biggest professional regrets, not because of vanity, but because it permanently altered her physical appearance and affected the types of roles she could pursue in Hollywood's notoriously image-conscious industry. The irony of Winters' commitment to this role becomes even more apparent when you consider that her character's defining moment in the film involves an underwater swimming sequence that required her to be in peak physical condition despite carrying the extra weight. She trained extensively with an Olympic swimming coach to prepare for the scene, demonstrating that her dedication to authenticity extended far beyond simply changing her appearance. The weight gain wasn't just a cosmetic choice, but part of a larger transformation that Winters believed would bring depth and realism to Belle Rosen, even though the personal cost lasted far longer than anyone, including Winters herself, ever anticipated. Fact 2. An actor's first stunt knocked him out cold. When director Ronald Neame needed someone to perform one of the most dangerous stunts in the Poseidon Adventure, he didn't call in a professional stuntman. Instead, he asked Ernie Orsatti, a relatively unknown actor who was playing the character Terry, to take a 32-foot fall straight through a skylight. This wasn't just any fall either. It was one of the film's most visually stunning moments, requiring the performer to crash through glass and plummet several stories in a single take. Orsatti had never done professional stunt work before, but somehow Neame convinced him to give it a shot. What happened next became one of the most talked-about moments on set. Orsatti agreed to do the stunt, climbed up to his position, and when the cameras rolled, he committed fully to the fall. He crashed through the skylight and plummeted the full 32 feet in one continuous take, hitting the landing perfectly. The crew rushed over to check on him, and according to people who were there that day, Orsatti was knocked out completely. One crew member later described him as being colder than a cucumber when they reached him, meaning he was totally unconscious from the impact. Miraculously, Orsatti wasn't seriously injured, and once he recovered, something unexpected happened. That single death-defying stunt completely changed the trajectory of his career. Industry professionals who witnessed the fall or saw the footage were so impressed by his fearlessness and physical commitment that Orsatti began receiving offers to work as a professional stuntman. He went on to have a successful career as a stunt performer and coordinator, working on numerous major Hollywood productions over the following decades. His willingness to take that terrifying leap through the skylight in the Poseidon Adventure essentially launched an entirely new profession for him, proving that sometimes the most dangerous moments can lead to the most unexpected opportunities. Fact 3. The film was shot in sequence. So actors got progressively dirtier. Most Hollywood productions shoot scenes out of order for scheduling and budget reasons, but director Ronald Neame made an unusual decision when filming The Poseidon Adventure in 1972. He chose to film the entire movie in chronological sequence, from beginning to end, exactly as the story unfolds on screen. This wasn't just an artistic choice, it was a practical strategy to maintain one of the film's most important visual elements: the authentic deterioration of the characters as they fought their way through the capsized ship. By shooting in order, the cast didn't need extensive makeup sessions to artificially recreate dirt, grime, and exhaustion for each scene. Instead, they actually became more disheveled and bedraggled as production continued day after day. The oil, soot, and water that covered them accumulated naturally during filming, and their costumes became genuinely soiled and torn through the physical demands of crawling through tight spaces, climbing makeshift ladders, and wading through water-filled sets. The exhaustion visible on their faces wasn't acting, it was real fatigue from weeks of demanding physical work. The cast sustained actual minor injuries throughout production that added to the realism. Bruises, scrapes, and cuts that appeared on screen weren't created by makeup artists. They were genuine wounds from the hazardous filming conditions. The actors' hair became increasingly matted and wild, their clothes progressively more tattered, and the layer of grime covering their skin grew thicker with each passing week. This gave the film a visceral authenticity that would have been nearly impossible to replicate through traditional makeup and wardrobe techniques. Neame's decision added significant complexity to the production schedule and likely increased costs, since it eliminated the flexibility of filming scenes out of order. However, the payoff was substantial. Audiences watching the Poseidon Adventure could genuinely see the characters transforming from well-dressed cruise passengers into desperate survivors. And every bit of that transformation was earned through the actors' real physical ordeal during production. Fact 4. Carol Lynley didn't actually sing the Oscar-winning song. One of the most memorable moments in the Poseidon Adventure happens early in the film, when Carol Lynley's character Nani performs a gentle, hopeful rendition of The Morning After in the ship's lounge. The song would go on to win the Academy Award for Best Original Song in 1973, becoming one of the most recognizable movie themes of the decade. But despite what audiences saw on screen, the voice coming from Lynley's lips wasn't actually her own. The vocals were performed by a studio singer named Renee Armand, who dubbed over Lynley's lip-syncing performance. This was a fairly common practice in Hollywood at the time, especially when producers wanted a specific look paired with a specific sound. Armand's clear, emotional delivery helped sell the song's message of hope and survival, which becomes even more poignant as the disaster unfolds later in the film. The recording perfectly captured the intimate, vulnerable quality the scene needed, and most viewers watching in theaters had no idea they were hearing a different singer. What makes this fact particularly strange is that Carol Lynley herself later muddied the waters about who actually sang the song. In several interviews over the years, Lynley claimed that she had performed the vocals herself, contradicting the documented studio credits. Whether this was a genuine misremembering on her part or an intentional attempt to claim credit for the iconic performance remains unclear. Some entertainment historians have suggested she may have recorded a version during filming that was ultimately replaced, which could explain her insistence. Others believe she simply wanted to be associated with the Oscar-winning song that had become such a significant part of the film's legacy. Regardless of the confusion, Renee Armand's contribution remains an essential piece of the Poseidon Adventure's success, even if her name never became as well known as the movie itself. The song topped charts worldwide and remains instantly recognizable more than 50 years later. Fact 5. Gene Hackman's toupee had a mind of its own. Gene Hackman's performance as Reverend Frank Scott in the Poseidon Adventure is remembered for its intensity and raw emotional power. But there was one aspect of his appearance that nearly stole the show in an unintended way. Throughout the film, Hackman wore a toupee to cover his receding hairline, and during one particular scene, that hairpiece became an unexpected source of distraction for both the cast and anyone paying close attention to the details. The scene in question is the film's opening sequence, where Reverend Scott delivers a passionate and controversial sermon aboard the ship. It's a pivotal moment that establishes his character as a rebellious, unconventional man of faith who challenges his congregation with fiery rhetoric about fighting for survival and questioning God. The scene was shot outdoors on the deck of the ship, which meant Hackman was exposed to natural wind and the elements. This created a significant problem because his toupee was apparently not secured as firmly as it should have been. Observers on set and viewers who've watched the scene closely have noted that the hairpiece appears to shift and flutter in ways that real hair simply wouldn't. It's been described as looking like it was barely attached and struggling to stay in place, with the wind pulling it in several different directions at once. Some have joked that the toupee seemed to have a life of its own, as if it was actively trying to escape from Hackman's head during his impassioned speech. Despite this technical wardrobe issue, Hackman powered through the scene with complete commitment to his character, never breaking his intensity or acknowledging the problem. The footage was ultimately used in the final cut of the film, toupee troubles and all. For modern viewers who know what to look for, it adds an unintentionally amusing layer to an otherwise serious and dramatic opening sequence. Fact 6. Shelley Winters trained with an Olympic coach for her swimming scene. When Shelley Winters signed on to play Belle Rosen in the Poseidon Adventure, she knew the role would demand something extraordinary from her, and not just the intentional weight gain she committed to for authenticity. Her character was written as a former competitive swimmer, and the film's most emotional and physically demanding sequence would require her to swim underwater through a flooded engine room to save the other survivors. For an actress in her early 50s who had just gained 35 pounds specifically for this role, the challenge seemed almost impossible, but Winters approached it with the dedication of a true method performer. Rather than rely on stunt doubles or camera tricks, Winters insisted on doing the underwater swimming herself, which meant she needed to genuinely perform like someone who had once been an athlete. To prepare for the scene, she sought out professional help at the highest level, training with an Olympic swimming coach who worked with her extensively to build up her lung capacity and refine her swimming technique. The coach helped her learn to hold her breath for extended periods underwater, which was absolutely necessary because the scene required multiple takes in a massive water tank on the soundstage. Winters had to navigate through debris, pipes, and other obstacles while submerged, all while making it look natural and heroic rather than desperate or panicked. The training paid off spectacularly when filming began. Winters performed the entire underwater sequence herself, swimming with confidence and grace despite the added weight she was carrying and the inherently dangerous conditions of shooting in a flooded set. Director Ronald Neame and the crew were genuinely impressed by her stamina and commitment, especially considering that many younger actors might have balked at such physical demands. The scene became one of the film's most memorable and heartbreaking moments, and Winters' genuine athletic ability made Belle Rosen's sacrifice feel completely believable. Her character's death immediately after completing the swim added even more emotional weight to her remarkable physical achievement, creating a moment that audiences still remember decades later. Fact 7. Gene Hackman changed the script to save Shelley Winters' best scene. One of the most emotionally powerful moments in the Poseidon Adventure almost didn't happen the way audiences remember it, and the film has Gene Hackman to thank for recognizing a major character flaw that would have undermined the entire story. In the original screenplay, when the survivors reach a flooded passageway blocking their escape route, Reverend Scott was supposed to order Belle Rosen, the former swimming champion played by Shelley Winters, to dive underwater and swim through the dangerous corridor to help the group advance. The script had Belle heroically volunteering for this mission while Scott stayed behind with the others, but Hackman immediately saw a problem with this approach that went beyond just the logistics of the scene. Hackman went to director Ronald Neame and argued passionately that his character, a minister who had spent the entire film taking responsibility for leading these survivors to safety, would absolutely never send an overweight elderly woman on a potentially fatal underwater mission while he stood by and watched. It simply didn't align with everything the audience had learned about Reverend Scott's personality, his protective nature, or his willingness to put himself in danger for others. Hackman believed the scene would make Scott look cowardly or callous, destroying the audience's connection to the character at a critical moment in the film. Neame listened to Hackman's concerns and agreed to reverse the sequence entirely. In the final version, Scott makes the dangerous swim himself while Belle insists on following him to help, ultimately suffering a heart attack from the physical strain and dying in her husband's arms in what became one of the most heartbreaking scenes in disaster film history. This change not only preserved Scott's heroic character arc, but also gave Winters the dramatic death scene that would earn her an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress, transforming what could have been a questionable character decision into one of cinema's most memorable sacrifices. Fact 8. Jack Albertson won $260,000 from Shelley Winters playing cards and never got paid. When you're stuck on a film set for months shooting a disaster movie in chronological order, you need something to pass the time between takes. For Jack Albertson and Shelley Winters, that something was gin rummy. And what started as a casual way to kill time turned into one of the most expensive card games in Hollywood history. According to both Ernest Borgnine and director Ronald Neame, Albertson and Winters played cards constantly during breaks in filming, and by the time production wrapped, Albertson had won an absolutely staggering $260,000 from his co-star. To put that in perspective, that amount in 1972 would be worth well over $1.5 million today, which means these weren't just friendly games with pocket change on the line. The story gets even more interesting when you consider that Winters apparently had no intention of ever paying up. Both Borgnine and Neame confirmed in separate interviews that despite the massive debt, Winters never settled her losses with Albertson. Whether this was because the games were considered just for fun, because Winters genuinely couldn't afford to pay such an enormous sum, or simply because she refused to honor the debt remains unclear. What makes the situation particularly amusing is that these two actors spent their days filming scenes together as a married couple, Manny and Belle Rosen, one of the most beloved pairs in the movie, all while this massive unpaid gambling debt hung between them. Albertson, who won an Academy Award for his role in The Subject Was Roses just a few years earlier, apparently took the whole situation in stride and never publicly complained about being stiffed. The fact that this story only came to light through the recollections of their co-stars and director suggests that both actors kept the matter relatively private, perhaps understanding that a $250,000 card game debt might not be the best publicity for a family-friendly disaster film. Fact 9. Leslie Nielsen played it completely straight before becoming a comedy legend. If you only know Leslie Nielsen from his legendary comedy roles in movies like Airplane and the Naked Gun series, watching him in the Poseidon Adventure might feel like stepping into an alternate universe. In 1972, Nielsen played Captain Harrison, the doomed commander of the SS Poseidon, with absolutely no hint of the comedic genius that would later define his career. He delivered every line with grave seriousness, portraying a ship captain facing an impossible disaster with quiet dignity and professionalism. There wasn't a single wink at the camera or deadpan joke in sight, because at that point in his career, Nielsen was known exclusively as a dramatic actor who specialized in authority figures and serious roles. What makes this performance so fascinating in retrospect is that it came just 8 years before Airplane completely transformed his entire career trajectory, when directors Jim Abrahams and David and Jerry Zucker cast Nielsen in Airplane. In 1980, they specifically chose him because of his history playing straight-laced, authoritative characters with complete earnestness. The joke was that Nielsen would deliver absurd, ridiculous dialogue with the exact same deadpan seriousness he brought to roles like Captain Harrison in the Poseidon Adventure. That comedic approach worked so brilliantly that it launched an entirely new phase of Nielsen's career, and he spent the next 3 decades becoming one of Hollywood's most beloved comedy actors. The weird part is that if you watch the Poseidon Adventure now, knowing what came later, Nielsen's performance almost feels like it was foreshadowing his future. His utterly serious delivery of dramatic lines, his authoritative presence, and his complete lack of humor are exactly the qualities that made him so funny when placed in absurd situations. The same skills that made him a convincing ship captain in a disaster movie became the foundation for Dr. Rumack in Airplane, and Detective Frank Drebin in The Naked Gun. It's a strange reminder that sometimes the path to comedy greatness starts with playing things completely, unironically straight. Fact 10. The real Queen Mary. Almost capsized, inspiring the story. The Poseidon Adventure didn't just spring from pure imagination, it was inspired by a terrifying real-life incident that almost sent one of the world's most famous ocean liners to the bottom of the sea. Author Paul Gallico was aboard the RMS Queen Mary in December of 1937 when the ship encountered a massive storm in the North Atlantic. The luxury liner was hit by violent waves that caused it to roll severely to one side, sending passengers and furniture sliding across the decks and creating absolute chaos below. Gallico later said the experience was so frightening that it planted the seed for what would eventually become his novel about a capsized ocean liner, though he wouldn't write the book until decades later. But the Queen Mary's brush with disaster didn't end there. During World War II, the ship had been converted into a troop transport and was carrying thousands of American soldiers across the Atlantic when it encountered what's known as a rogue wave, an unexpectedly massive wall of water that can appear seemingly out of nowhere. On December 7, 1942, the ship was hit broadside by a wave estimated to be between 80 and 90 feet tall. The enormous impact caused the Queen Mary to roll dramatically to one side, tilting so far over that water poured through the portholes, and crew members were certain the ship was going down. Passengers and soldiers were thrown against walls, equipment broke free and crashed through the corridors, and for several terrifying moments, the massive vessel seemed suspended at an impossible angle. After the ship finally righted itself and the crew had time to assess what happened, naval architects later calculated that the Queen Mary had rolled to an angle of 52 degrees, just 3 degrees short of her calculated point of no return. If the ship had tilted just 5 more inches, the laws of physics would have taken over and the Queen Mary would have capsized completely, sending everyone aboard to a watery grave. This near disaster, combined with Gallico's earlier storm experience, gave him all the inspiration he needed to write his novel about the fictional SS Poseidon and the survivors who must climb through an upside-down ship to escape. Fact 11. Co-stars who played lovers actually hated each other. On-screen chemistry doesn't always translate to real life, and few movie sets have proven this, quite like the Poseidon Adventure. Red Buttons and Carol Lynley played James Martin and Nani Perry, 2 characters who develop a sweet and touching romance while fighting for survival aboard the capsized ship. Their connection in the film feels genuine and heartfelt, with tender moments that give audiences an emotional anchor amid all the disaster and chaos. But behind the scenes, the 2 actors could barely stand to be in the same room together. During production, Buttons and Lindley clashed constantly and made no effort to hide their mutual dislike. When the cameras stopped rolling, they avoided each other completely and refused to interact unless absolutely necessary for a scene. Cast members and crew witnessed the tension between them throughout the entire shoot, which made their convincing romantic chemistry on screen all the more impressive. It takes serious professionalism to portray genuine affection for someone you actively dislike, but both actors managed to pull it off without letting their personal feelings interfere with their performances. The exact reasons for their feud during filming have never been fully explained, though Hollywood sets are notorious for personality clashes under stressful conditions. The Poseidon Adventure was physically demanding and emotionally exhausting for everyone involved, which likely didn't help matters between the two co-stars. Whatever the specific cause of their animosity, it was real and it was intense throughout the production. Here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Years after the film wrapped and both actors had moved on to other projects, something shifted between them. Buttons and Lindley eventually reconciled and became genuinely close friends in their later years. The bitterness and tension that defined their working relationship on the Poseidon Adventure faded away, replaced by mutual respect and real affection. It's a reminder that sometimes people just need time and distance to see each other differently, and that even the worst on-set feuds don't have to last forever. Fact 12. The Mad Magazine parody became its best-selling issue ever. When the Poseidon Adventure hit theaters in December of 1972, it became an instant cultural phenomenon, raking in over $84 million at the box office and becoming one of the highest-grossing films of the year. But while Hollywood celebrated its success, the satirists at Mad Magazine were already sharpening their pencils for what would become one of the most memorable parodies in the publication's history. In September of 1973, Mad released their spoof titled The Poop Side Down Adventure, and it didn't just poke fun at the disaster film, it made publishing history in the process. What made this issue so remarkable wasn't just the clever wordplay or the hilarious send-up of the movie's over-the-top disaster sequences. It was the cover itself that broke with decades of Mad Magazine tradition. For the first time ever since the magazine's founding in 1952, the cover didn't feature the smiling, gap-toothed face of their iconic mascot, Alfred E. Newman. Instead, readers were greeted with an image of Alfred's feet sticking out of a life preserver, floating upside down in water, perfectly capturing the topsy-turvy nature of the film being parodied. The visual gag was simple but brilliant, and it caught the attention of Mad fans everywhere. The gamble paid off spectacularly. This issue became the best-selling single issue in Mad Magazine's entire history up to that point, flying off newsstands faster than the publisher could restock them. The parody inside featured the usual Mad treatment, with the magazine's writers and artists skewering everything from the film's melodramatic performances to its increasingly absurd survival scenarios. They renamed characters with ridiculous variations and exaggerated the already tense disaster scenes into comedic gold, all while maintaining the sharp satirical edge that Mad Magazine was famous for. The success of this issue proved that sometimes breaking your own rules and taking creative risks can lead to your biggest triumphs, even for a magazine that had been following the same formula for over 2 decades. Fact 13. Gene Hackman's brother was the stunt coordinator. When Gene Hackman signed on to play Reverend Frank Scott in the Poseidon Adventure, he wasn't just stepping into one of the most physically demanding roles of his career. He was also entering a workplace where his own brother would be calling the shots on some of the film's most dangerous sequences. Richard Hackman served as the stunt coordinator for the 1972 disaster epic, putting him in the unique position of choreographing and overseeing the very stunts his famous sibling would be performing throughout the production. This family connection meant that when Gene Hackman was climbing through flooded corridors, scaling upside-down staircases, or performing any of the countless physical challenges the role demanded, his brother Richard was right there behind the scenes, making sure everything was properly planned and executed. The relationship added an interesting dynamic to the set, as Richard had to balance his professional responsibilities with the natural concern that comes with watching a family member put themselves in harm's way for the sake of a movie. The Poseidon Adventure required an enormous amount of stunt work and physical coordination, with actors frequently working in water, navigating treacherous sets built to represent the capsized ocean liner, and performing falls and climbs that would have been risky, even under normal circumstances. Having Richard Hackman as stunt coordinator meant the production had someone who understood both the technical requirements of the job and the capabilities of one of the film's lead actors on a deeply personal level. While it's not uncommon for family members to work together in Hollywood, having a brother serve as stunt coordinator while the other performs in such a physically grueling role was a relatively unusual arrangement. The Hackman brothers' professional collaboration helped ensure that Gene could push himself to deliver an authentic and physically convincing performance while maintaining the safety standards necessary for such an ambitious and dangerous production. Fact 14. The film was shot aboard the actual Queen Mary. When filmmakers needed the perfect location to bring the Poseidon Adventure to life in 1972, they didn't have to look far for authenticity, because they ended up shooting several scenes aboard the actual RMS Queen Mary, the very ship that had inspired author Paul Gallico to write the original novel decades earlier. The Queen Mary, permanently docked in Long Beach, California, served as both a historical artifact and a working film set, creating an eerie connection between fiction and reality that few people realize when they watch the movie. The story behind this connection goes back to December of 1937, when Gallico was a passenger aboard the Queen Mary during a violent Atlantic crossing. The ship was struck by a massive rogue wave that rolled her to such an extreme angle that water poured into the funnels, and calculations later showed the vessel came within just 5 inches of her capsizing point. Gallico, terrified by the experience and convinced he was about to die, survived the ordeal, but never forgot the feeling of being trapped aboard a tilting ocean liner that seemed moments away from turning completely upside down. That harrowing experience planted the seed for his novel, which would eventually become the film. By the time production began on the Poseidon Adventure, the Queen Mary had been retired from service and was permanently moored in Long Beach as a tourist attraction and hotel. The filmmakers recognized the symbolic value of using the actual ship for certain sequences, particularly exterior shots and some interior scenes that captured the authentic feel of a 1930s ocean liner. Walking through the real corridors and grand rooms of the Queen Mary gave the production a level of period detail and atmosphere that would have been difficult to recreate entirely on sound stages. For the cast and crew, filming aboard the ship that had nearly met the same fate as their fictional Poseidon added an unsettling layer of realism to their work, knowing they were standing on the decks where passengers had once clung for their lives during that terrifying storm 35 years earlier. Fact 15. Gene Hackman called it just a money job. Gene Hackman has never been one to romanticize his career choices, and his blunt assessment of the Poseidon Adventure proves just how brutally honest he can be about the roles he's taken. The actor has openly admitted that he signed on to the 1972 disaster film purely for the paycheck, viewing it as a commercial project rather than an artistic endeavor. While this kind of pragmatic approach isn't unusual in Hollywood, where actors often balance passion projects with more lucrative mainstream work, what makes this fact particularly memorable is how Hackman delivered this revelation to an admiring fellow filmmaker. Years later, while working together on the Royal Tenenbaums in 2001, director Ben Stiller approached Hackman on set to share how much the Poseidon Adventure had meant to him as a young, aspiring filmmaker. Stiller gushed enthusiastically about how the film had inspired his career and influenced his love of cinema during his formative years. It was the kind of heartfelt moment where a younger artist expresses genuine admiration for the work that shaped their creative journey. Instead of graciously accepting the compliment or sharing a fond memory from the production, Hackman responded with characteristically blunt indifference. He simply said, "Oh yeah, money job," and then walked away, leaving Stiller standing there with his admiration completely deflated. The exchange perfectly captures Hackman's no-nonsense personality and his refusal to pretend that every role held deep personal significance for him. While many actors might have offered a polite response or at least acknowledged the compliment, Hackman chose radical honesty over sentimentality. For Stiller, who had built up the Poseidon Adventure as this formative cinematic experience, having his childhood hero dismiss it so casually must have been crushing. The incident reveals an interesting truth about the gap between how audiences experience films and how actors view their own work. What might be a career-defining masterpiece to viewers can simply represent another day at the office for the people who made it.